Hello, my name is Barbara Kay, and on behalf of my co-host Susan Pertnoy and the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, I'd like to welcome you to our program, Mosaic.
We're on location today at the Norton Museum of Art. We're here to see a show called This Place, The Lens Through Photography for Israel. This unique exhibit is debuting here at the museum, and it's the brainchild of internationally acclaimed French photographer Frederic Brenner. Before we talk with Mr. Brenner, we want to give a special thank you to Vanessa and Tony Beyer, members of our Federation community who have generously been the lead donors for this exhibition. We'll be back with our guests and our special program after this brief message.
Our Jewish Federation has accomplished so much and still needs keep growing. You can help us do even more. Community, like every gift, counts. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
It was a shock when my smart, strong husband had a stroke. His mind was agile, but everything else failed him. I didn't see how he could possibly recover. But through patience, skill, and compassion, the caregivers at Morse Life brought him back to himself. They brought him back to me.
Morse Life Short-Term Rehabilitation.
Morse Life Health System, honoring senior living.
What if you could change the world? You can. We can do it together. Federation and you, changing the world together.
Okay, welcome Charles Bromfin.
I'm pleased to be here, Barbara Kay.
You're the philanthropist of the Western world.
Oh my gosh,
oh
no,
my
no,
God,
no.
yes.
No.
Yes, listen, I just finished showing our viewers the magnificent work of Brenner and the whole exhibit here at the Norton.
Well, he is a great photographer and a great guy.
Oh my God, how did you get involved with him?
Well, I met him at my late mother-in-law's in Jerusalem. She used to have these, not soirees, because it was Shabbat lunches. And they were terrific. And one day, my late wife Andy and I went over to her mother's, and there by the swimming pool was Frederic with his then wife, and a little baby who I imagine is quite a grown-up young woman now.
Yeah.
That was over 20 years ago.
Wow.
And then I found out that he does these photographs, and at that time, he was doing one with the Haredim in Jerusalem.
He was? Oh,
yeah,
really?
and he's done numbers of different, shall we say, gigs, except these are wonderfully artistic impressions that he's done. So one was the Haredim. He did one of Russian Jews in Russia, and then the same people when they had made Aliyah to Israel.
So he followed the whole pattern.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
He did other ones. I have a photograph at home, and people don't know this. It was outside the Vatican, and the people who sell all the memorabilia for the Vatican are all Jews.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and he lined up a whole bunch of them.
Oh, and he photographed them.
Yeah, and he stages all his photographs.
Isn't that interesting?
That's quite wonderful.
Yeah, well, I tell you something, you did something great because you created a venue for a celebration of people who are philanthropic to the Federation here.
Well, actually, I didn't. I found out from the Federation that they had done this, and I think Tony Beyer and his wife have financed. Yeah, they financed this thing. And I was asked, because we know Frederic, whether Rita and I would like to sponsor it.
So you did sponsor?
So we did, yeah.
Well, I tell you something, I think it's a gift to the community for them to come here, look at the exhibit, because I think it's extraordinary, and for you to celebrate the opportunity.
No, we're not celebrating.
You're not celebrating?
You guys are all celebrating. No, it's true. The people who are doing the giving, they're celebrating. I think it's wonderful that Norton and Federation are getting together. And I hope they have many more interfaces and interchanges.
Yeah. Tell me one thing before we conclude. What makes you so philanthropic?
Very simple. My grandparents on both sides hated where they were. They were in Moldova, and they were in, I think my mother's mother was from Riga, and they came to the frozen wastelands of Western Canada, and they suffered and they went through hell. And I'm just saying thank you. Very simple.
Well, I have to tell you, I want to say thank you too.
Always,
It's such a pleasure.
always great being with you, Barbara.
Pleasure.
Welcome, Tim Ride.
Thank you so much.
What is your actual job here?
I'm the William and Sarah Ross Soder Curator of Photographs here at the Norton Museum of Art.
So you're the one that put this whole thing together?
Well, I'm the one that they let put this whole thing together. You know, the beauty of having a show come from someplace else is you have a chance to see it ahead of time. And so you can kind of envision how it would work for our audiences and in our spaces.
But there's an artistic component to that. I mean, you have to have a good eye to figure out which photographs are critical and would work here.
It's really a lovely collaboration. And here I was collaborating with 12 different artists. And I always feel lucky that they trust me with their work. You know, curators are funny creatures. You know, we kind of live off of the output of other artists, and but in this case, it was really an easy show to do because the artists are so amazing.
Can you tell us about some of them?
Well, one of the reasons we took this show is we had no idea what the pictures were, because we committed to the show long before there was any output or product. And so we took it on the strength of the artists who are in the show.
Really?
Thomas Struth is perhaps one of the most well-known photographers internationally. Gilles Perez wrote one of the most important photo books of the 20th century. Fred Brenner's been working, as you know, for the last 30 years, you know, on one project. Fazil Sheikh, brilliant. I mean, he has a MacArthur, so he is certifiably a genius. It really was, and lest I forget, Joseph Kudelka, who's kind of like a god of photography. You know, these are people that I've always wanted to work with, people I've always wanted to bring to the Norton, and this was our opportunity to do it.
You know something that's so exciting? Let me shake your hand because you did a good job. We're going to be speaking with Frederic Brenner now. And that
Fantastic.
is so exciting for us too. It was so nice of you to tell us all about this.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it.
Frederic Brenner, what a pleasure it is to meet you. I love your photographs. I really do. Let's tell the viewers a little bit about your background, your parents, how you grew up.
I was born in Paris. My parents were born in Paris. My grandparents came from East and West. East on my mother's side, they are Spanish Jews who came from Algeria. And on my father's side, they came from Eastern Europe and Ukraine. And my parents met in Paris. And I am at the crossroads of East and West. And I would say that I grew up in Paris. I studied, my background is French literature and social anthropology. And at when I was 18, I would say that I felt a kind of inner call, what hadn't been spoken within my family. I needed to deal with it. And I didn't wake up one morning thinking that I was going to undertake such a journey. I believe one is being undertaken by the journey that he undertakes. It's always what we do not know about ourselves that bring us to do what we do. And retrospectively, we revisit this journey and say, oh yes, this and that. No. So I believe that the history of my mother during the war in Paris, who survived the war and the Holocaust, and my father, who survived also in different ways, and the Six Days War, which was a wake-up call for many Jews in France and worldwide. And slowly my parents, who were, you know, what you could call a very assimilated family, I would say, what the Shoah didn't do, assimilation did it. And slowly after the 6 Day War, my parents just decided slowly to come back to Judaism. And so I was part of their experiment as their son. I have one brother and one sister. And for me, reclaiming this unspoken history took me to about 40 different countries. I physically lived for about 6 months in 40 different countries. I wanted to piece together my own puzzle. So I lived, from Rome to New York, from former Soviet Union to Ethiopia, to Yemen, to China, trying to piece together the puzzle of the Jewish people, trying to understand how, as a people, we have survived with a portable identity.
So I think you did this over a period of about 25 years.
Yes.
And you are most famous for your opus, Diaspora. What motivated you to do this?
Well, first, let's explain what this enormous book is. It's
Diaspora is, again, the summary of 25 years exploring the multiplicity of dissonant identities from people who lived, from Birobidzhan, this republic that Stalin created in the 30s, which was the Jewish state. 20 years before Israel was created, Stalin thought of a Jewish state in the middle of the taiga at the border of China, and Jews from, Argentina, France, America, and of course, former Soviet Union went there to build the Jewish state. It never really happened. It remained an autonomous region. So I spent there 6 months at the very beginning of the perestroika. But I lived in Yemen for 6 months. I lived in India for 6 months. I lived in Rome for a year. I live in America. I spent 3 years in America in 32 different states to try to understand this incredible experimental laboratory that has been created on Earth. Not even since the Hellenistic period, such experimental laboratory had been created. And so just to explore the largest possible spectrum of expressions and representation of Jews and Judaism.
And you said in one of your writings that you had to dispel the myth that Jews are one people. They're very diverse people.
Yes,
discovered.
I would say that I really make images to break images. And I started with the idea that, it's one people. And my first work took me to Jerusalem, to the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood of Mea Shearim. And this is where I started my journey. And what is very interesting is that my entire project has to do with diaspora. And what fascinated me in this small group of Jews who came originally from Hungary and Poland was how they recreated in the heart of Jerusalem a shtetl. How they do live in diaspora in the heart of the Middle East. How they recreated diaspora. So my very first project, which retrospectively appears to be the matrix of this project, which took me for 25 years, everywhere on the planet, but it started in Jerusalem. And it's, in a way, a reverse journey, starting from Jerusalem and then going, from the island of Djerba in Tunisia to Sarajevo, to Ethiopia, you name it, everywhere, from, from Bukhara to Baku, etc.
Yeah, actually, this book. These two books, I should say, are really something that everybody should read. Because what it does is it gives you an impact of the culture and the adaptation of the Jews within that culture. It's fascinating. It really is.
It is really to show a people who have immersed for 2,000 years among the nations and who became impregnated of the sensitive and intellectual landscapes of the cultures they were dwelling among. And so, and what I show through this work is how far did the Jew became the defining other wherever he was living, and how he remained himself. And identity as a journey between the other and the self, back and forth all the time. And this is what this book is about, and how people have been able to survive with, again, a portable identity.
How does this affect your personal journey?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I would say the following. This is what you could consider as an exploration of the planet. An outer journey is an inner journey, of course. I'm speaking of the other. But what I became interested in was, of course, to deal with the other within. And to deal with those parts which in me had been abandoned, betrayed, not dealt with, buried. And this is what this journey has enabled me to do, to reclaim all those parts that compose who I am. And we are not a monolithic entity. We are, Fernando Pessoa, the Portuguese poet, say, we are various, we are many. We are an overflow of self. In the outstretched colony of our being, all kinds of people feel and think in various ways. And this is what this journey has enabled me to reclaim.
Do you know what's interesting? One of the things that you were not a photographer in the very beginning. And when the first time you went to Israel and you started to take a camera and shoot Mira Sharim, after that, somehow or other, the whole thing started to take over. And I don't know whether you became the photographer became you, or you became the photograph.
I would say the following. First of all, I don't shoot people. I embrace people. My camera is a way to
we
embrace
try to do
people.
that too.
and I would say that the necessity was far beyond photography. My camera was just a tool to address questions about, my humanity and the human condition at large. Only, I would say, much later did photography became the subject of my interest as much as the people were the subject of my interest. So I would say 10 years later, I started to question the means with which I was trying to represent those groups that I've been meeting. And the big challenge was, I would say, to reinvent at each stage of this project a form at the measure of what was at stake with this or that community that I was dealing with. I couldn't photograph a tribal group at the border of Saudi Arabia in Yemen the same way I would photograph a community in Los Angeles, in a postmodern society, or Hong Kong. So each time I had to reinvent my own grammar and my own syntax to address the right questions with the right tools.
Very interesting. What is the responsibility of the photographer as opposed to the responsibility of the viewer?
The responsibility of the photographer is to try to address questions, to try to broaden his horizon, and to leave enough room in the frame that he creates for each person to start his or her own journey and to reconsider their perspective on what is a Jew.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We're going to be back right after this break, and I want to discuss the exhibit that's here today and how you put it together.
Okay.
It's really something. We'll be right back after this brief message.
Through our partner agency programs in Israel, Federation creates opportunities for at-risk youth, families, and seniors. We also provide emergency assistance to the victims of terrorism. Community, like every gift, counts. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
My wife was the light of my life. Being her caregiver was both a joy and a challenge. I was determined to stick with it, but I needed help. Moore's Life was there. I lost her after a long journey, but now Moore's Life comes to help me. I look forward to seeing them.
Moore's Life Home Healthcare.
Moore's Life Health System, honoring senior living.
Thousands of community members come together through programs and services provided by Federation and our local partner agencies to create a vibrant and vital community in Palm Beach County. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
Welcome back, and we're busy talking with world-renowned photographer Frederic Brenner, and we're at the Norton, and we would like you to discuss this place, your wonderful exhibit.
This place started with an intuition, and it was in 2006. I was at that time disturbed by the way Israel had been portrayed through the media, and I thought it was unfair for Israel, but I thought also it was unfair for the people who were depicting Israel in such a way. And I thought, what would happen if I would be able to invite and convince 10, 20, 50, I didn't know, photographers, not photo reporters and not photojournalists, but artists who had developed their own grammar and their own syntax to recontextualize Israel as place and metaphor. Israel as the place of the shared origin. Israel as a place where three monotheisms, which gave birth to three major narratives, have been in conflict for the last 2,000 years. The entire idea, and I will use the word of Moshe Halbertal, was really to invite people to look at Israel as a place where the maps of the sacred overlap, compete, and ultimately exclude each other. The entire idea was really to bring people to exit a dual paradigm, a dual perspective, for Israel, against Israel, victim, perpetrator. The idea was really to enable people to look beyond the political narrative, not to ignore it or bypass it, it's impossible, but to try to look at the archaic stakes, at the root level, not at the symptom, but really at the cause, before it become a political or religious conflict. And in order to do that, when I say I look at Israel as place and metaphor, for me the first metaphor has to do with Israel as a place of radical otherness, a place where every single person is the other of somebody else. Among Jews, an Ethiopian for a Russian, a Moroccan for a German, a French for an American. Among Muslims, an Arab Christian for an Arab Muslim, an Armenian for a Jew, and all the diagonal relation that you can find. And again, an Israel as a place of radical dissonance. I didn't bring people to look at the land of milk and honey. I really wanted to bring people to look beyond the headlines and to look deep in the fault lines. I wanted to expose people to the incredible humanity that exists in those fault lines. And I wanted to expose people to the many scars that cannot be ignored any longer in Israel. I didn't want a postcard of Israel. And because photographers had never been to Israel, I eventually interviewed about 30 artists. I ended up with about 18, and ultimately we had 12 artists who agreed to come to Israel, first for an exploratory mission. They had never been to Israel except for 3. And because photographers ask, what is it all about? Who are the people who are paying for that? Is it, whenever you hear Israel, you hear propaganda. And photographers were afraid to be instrumentalized, to be manipulated, to be used, in other terms. And they came to Israel for an exploratory mission. It was about between 2 and 3 weeks. And they were given carte blanche to explore Israel from east to west, from north to south. And they met with a very large range of actors of Israeli society, from political scientists to rabbis, to social activists, to philosophers, all kind of people. And the entire idea was to expose them during those 2 weeks to the largest possible spectrum of narratives, to get them totally confused, but on a very high level, and to try to create a vacuum out of which they would reclaim the working hypothesis that I've tried to define and define the vectors of their own portrait.
Yeah. What's amazing, how many portraits do you have here? Approximately.
I think we have about 500 photographs.
Yeah, we're going to look at some of them. But seriously, what is the effect you feel of this exhibit? What do you hope will happen because of this exhibit when people come and see it?
We have no answers. We have very difficult questions that we are addressing, for which we have no answer ourselves. This project is about being exposed to the unbearable complexity, the unbearable paradoxes, and the unbearable dissonance of this place, which is a mirror for all humanity. And that's why it is not, I say it's Israel as place and metaphor. It's an essay about the human condition and the inner lives of individuals.
What's so amazing, Susan, when you think about it, is this is the first place in America that the exhibit has come to, coupled with the fact that we hope the people watching will come and see this because it's so impactful. You have done such a remarkable job. You really have.
You're like a conductor and a musician at the same time.
I would say
wonderful orchestration.
Indeed, I have seen myself as the conductor of a very big symphonic orchestra, and my role was to make sure that everybody would play according to its own score, and everybody will play together. And so the idea really about this project is art at its best, but in order to foster a conversation about Israel and about the inner life of individuals, starting with ourselves, and starting to look at the other within each of us.
That is beautiful. I want to thank you so much.
You should be so proud.
Susan, everybody that comes gets an information page on all of the artists that are here so they can read about them. Thank you. That was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed it tremendously. We both did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara, this was such a privilege to be a part of this exhibit.
I agree with you. I loved everything about it, and I loved the beautiful, beautiful photographs. It was wonderful. Thank you for being with us as well. Be with us again next week when we have another look into the Jewish world. Goodbye from MOSAIC.